Welcome to the Sex, God, and Chaos podcast, a conversation built to help you address the mess, connect the dots, and defeat addiction. Doing your work matters because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Life is tough and we're here to help. I'm your host, Ben Derrick, and as always, I'll be joined by Eva Hunter. Let's jump right in. Back again in the Sex, God, and Chaos podcast. By the way, the name is awesome, but it's hard to say without sounding like sex god.
Yes.
Maybe it's a Freudian slip.
It could be. And, I think we probably get a lot of guys looking for porn that they stumble upon the podcast.
Check out the Sex God Chaos.
The sex god.
There's definitely a comma there. Sex God Chaos, right?
That's right. Yeah, but hey, the porn guys, it'd probably be good for them to stumble on our podcast.
Absolutely. And what I love is our listeners are hearing, this is what it's like every time we're together.
It's just about ridiculous.
Yeah, even when we're trying to be serious. Like those moments where things are serious make me nervous.
That's right. Yeah, it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah. So today, what we've got rolling out as an episode, we should call this episode "Back by Popular Demand."
There's no doubt.
No doubt about it, right? So we've invited Eva back into the studio, pre-recorded this conversation with her because, as we have discovered, she's probably the most well-boundaried person in America.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there are therapists in our area that they refer people to Eva to work on boundaries.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
This conversation that we recorded, though, was, I use this word maybe too much, but it really applies here. Completely fascinating for me because we're discussing something that the culture in a lot of ways hates, but also has embraced, and this big word, labels. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but in my experience, when I try to label someone, there's immediate resistance to that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes a label can be very descriptive. I mean, we love labels on products because they help us investigate the product, what's in it, how it's going to affect us. But when we start putting labels on ourselves, we get in a little bit of trouble, and we definitely don't like it. But they can be helpful.
Yeah, in psychobabble world, we have to do some diagnosis of something. And, that's the part I just don't like because, sometimes it fits and sometimes it's just pretty obvious. But a lot of times it really doesn't. And it could be an amalgamation of different disorders or it's not always anxiety, clear-cut anxiety. It's depression. It's both and. I mean, there's just all this, and it's just a little bit frustrating because even when people get the label, well, now I'm bipolar. And I have people come into my office and like, hey, I just want you to know I'm bipolar. And they've got that on their intake form or something. And I just go, look, dude, I want you to talk about that with your doctor, get your medication, and you deal with that there. But in here, you're just going to be Bubba. We're going to talk about you and not your label. And certainly in the world that we work in, the labeling, it can be good because sometimes it just gives us a framework, right?
There you go.
And it's just the idea that, like Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, if we're viewing labels from a correct point of view, it isn't who I am as much as it is maybe what I'm doing or how I'm participating, especially relationally. So this conversation, I think, is going to be so helpful for our listeners in trying to understand, okay, can I accept this descriptor of how I'm participating in relationship with other people? And once that acceptance happens, Eva just does such a great job of saying, okay, good, that's step one. Step two is, what do we do with that? And I think that's a question all of our listeners are asking, especially the ones that would click on a podcast called Sex, God, and Chaos. What do I do with this now? Eva just does such a great job of helping us together answer that question. So without further delay, here is Eva discussing labels. It's good to be back with you, Roan. I'm going to try the encouraging friend thing, see how that works.
Gosh, that'd be different for a change.
Yeah, it would be. I don't know. It feels strange to validate you. Gosh. Because it's like we're going to create a monster.
Well, Eva says that all the time too. It's like, I think her job is, she keeps me grounded, right?
Yeah.
She reminds me of, she's like
reality.
that, back in the Roman times, and the conquering heroes would come back in to the Colosseum, and they had the little guy in the back of the chariot whispering, "Thou art but a man. Thou art but a man." That's Eva's job and yours in my life.
Yeah, that's right.
I
that's
need
right.
that. Yeah.
Well, we all need each other. I think that's like one of the basic premises of this entire podcast. Is
That's
like,
it.
hey, everyone, we need each other, because there's certain parts of
I
you,
need that.
yeah, that are really crummy, and you need your friends and people that love you to remind you, hey, don't go there.
Yeah,
don't
do that. What is wrong with you?
Don't do it. I love that phrase that we talk about all the time. Hey, I'm doing it again.
Yeah.
I'm doing it again, right? So, well, we're happy to have Eva back in the studio with us to record another episode.
Yes, it is always good to sit with my life partner, my business partner, my life partner, my podcast partner,
your fun partner,
my travel partner,
your adventure partner.
That's it.
Really wild, like how much life you guys actually share together. And then when people hear your story, they're like, no way.
Oh, yeah.
No way it started like that, which is very hopeful. I think the fact that you guys have been so honest about just the rough beginnings of how everything went down. And one of my favorite things to think about in relation to the story that you guys tell is Eva going to your house and getting a beer out of the fridge. Yeah. I just love that. It probably never happened, but that's the way you tell it.
Well, he loves to, he embellishes.
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. It's rigorous honesty.
No, I would have been very uncomfortable doing that.
You were 15.
I would never have gone into his refrigerator.
It was Miller ponies.
That may have been
Miller ponies.
Not out of your refrigerator.
No, my mother gave you one. You didn't have
that
to.
may be true. That could be true. Yeah.
Oh, so fantastic.
Yes.
So, just such a huge journey. And I think we don't talk about this enough, but in relation to this, the topic of God and chaos in our sexual journeys, we just don't talk about isolation, relational connection. All this stuff happens over the course of a journey. It's not in moments or minutes. Like, it's a lot of stuff stacked together, and the stuff that happened before impacts the stuff that's happening now. And so to teach people and to teach ourselves really through conversation that things happen in an arc. It's not necessarily a straight line, and everybody's not on the same arc at the same time. Mm-hmm. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, what it's like to go through a process of being in relationship with someone who's sexually broken. We've recorded an episode before of like, well, how does that affect? What does that do? And they were kind of granular categories, and I think that was a very helpful episode. This episode, we're going to zoom out a little bit and talk about labels, which can be very scary for a lot of people. Don't label me, don't label me. Mm-hmm. But also labels can be incredibly helpful because they help you. A big word in our field is locate. We got to locate where you are. Right. So we're asking the right questions and trying to solve the right issues. So this episode, we're going to talk about the different labels or the phases at a meta level that someone who's been betrayed goes through. Fair enough description?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And, the labels, really on both sides of the fence, I always say, I've got 2 certifications, and I've got, in sex addiction, masters in counseling and all that good stuff. The CSAT certification, certified sex addiction therapist, and then certified clinical sex addiction specialist, and IR1, right? And I always say I just don't like the term, not because somehow I'm labeled as a sex addict. I've been talking about my sex addiction pretty early on in my recovery, and I think that was a God piece. I think that was, God kind of called me to begin to talk about it, because in 1990 nobody was talking about it, and I was not the only one dealing with it. And the thing about it being, when we say sex addiction, it conjures up images of somebody, a guy in a trench coat driving around in an ice cream van, going to playgrounds. And that's just not really what it is. And then, when we talk about addiction, drugs and alcohol, they, like physically alter the chemical composition of your brain, and it affects the body, and it'll destroy both. Whereas with sex and porn and these things, there's a definite brain effect. However, the brain can heal, and when a partner hears sex addict, there's a hopelessness that comes with that. And what I've found in doing this work, and even in my own journey, with the acting out, it's really more of kind of a binge and purge cycle. It's not a waking up every day like, I'm going to go, do this or whatever, and every waking moment is consumed by that. It's certainly compulsive, and there's patterns. But with somebody that's a crackhead, when he wakes up in the morning, if he's been asleep, he's only thinking about one thing, and he will lie, cheat, steal, rob, murder. He's got to go get that crack. And this just doesn't work that way. And you can take drugs and alcohol and put that back on the shelf, whereas with this, our sexuality is part of who we are. And I can't separate that and put it on the shelf. And so that's why we talk about this being a multifaceted problem. And there's soul issues, there's distorted thinking issues, faulty belief system, boundary failure. There's so much connected to it. And just to say, okay, it's an addiction, I think is kind of a mislabel. And when in reality, it's much more of a distress reduction behavior, an illegitimate coping mechanism that was figured out very early in our lives because it works it's highly effective. It's like a surgeon with a laser scalpel to numb, to medicate, to escape hurt, pain, feelings, and emotion. And so we get under this emotional distress, and then, the brain kicks in and says, okay, I know it works. And so there's a compulsive nature to it, but addiction may be kind of a misnomer in some ways.
What an explanation.
And so I know, Eva, in working with partners on the partner side of the fence, we've talked about the labels and kind of the evolution in our field of when you first started your journey.
Right. The term sex addiction, he was a sex addict, scared me to death because it felt like, the story in my head was that he had no control over his sexual thoughts. He didn't have any control over whether he was going to act out or not. That's what it felt. That was the story in my head. That felt really hopeless to me. And on the partner side of the fence, in 1990, the term for the partner was she was codependent. He or she was codependent. And then in the late 90s, the term co-addiction, he or she is a co-addict who is in a relationship with a sex addict. That was the label. And then now, presently, the term is the partner goes through betrayal trauma. Now, me personally, I can connect with all three of those terms in my own life. But what really fits the most for me and for many, many partners is the betrayal trauma. I could really see my codependency in relationship with Roan and relationship with other people as well. Not having the ability to say no, more of a people pleaser, needing the acceptance and love of others, kind of set me up for some of those codependent ways. Instead of being a well boundary person, I like to say today, for me, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no.
Boy, I like that. Hang on, let me write that down.
Except, I like it too, except when she says it to me. Yeah.
You guys have one of those marriages where like no is a complete sentence.
Well, actually, it's hell no for me.
Hell no.
Yeah. It's just no for others, but for me, it's hell no.
That's fantastic. So,
and then I could also connect though with the co-addiction, not necessarily to Roan as a person, but more the relationship, becoming really preoccupied with the relationship, wanting the relationship at all cost to myself. Like I would abandon myself in order to keep peace, to keep the relationship going. So again, I needed to become a very well-boundaried person. And betrayal trauma, right? The whole goal is to become a very well-boundaried person. This is what I will accept. This is what I won't accept.
yeah, that's a tough shift to be able to make, though, to what you're describing. I've had a lot of this in my life as well with that codependence. I'm only okay if you're okay. And if you're okay, then I'll make myself okay.
Right.
In some way. But being able to break that to say, even in a marriage relationship, which religion does a terrible job because they throw the Bible verse about the sun. Like, don't let the sun go down. And it's like, wow, well, everything's got to resolve in 24 hours if that's what that verse actually means. And experientially, I just haven't seen that occur. The more acute and the deeper the history of the problem, that's probably another discussion for another day. But to be able to say in these sorts of relationships that are binding, we've made this, the religious word for it would be covenant. Agreement. We've made an agreement. We have a contract, to say, I'm okay even if you're not okay. That feels a little bit like betrayal, like I'm betraying back. But actually what you're describing, it's a very healthy posture. That's being well-boundaried.
Right. And see, when there's intimacy in a relationship, he may be in a terrible place. But if he lets me know and gives me more of the backstory, like this is how I'm feeling, this is what's going on in my life, and it's because of this. And if there's a lot of communication, intimacy in a relationship, it has nothing to do with me. But that lack of intimacy, that lack of communication between two people can set up some codependency, right? We're walking on eggshells trying to figure out, is something, did I do something? I'm not sure. All that.
Well, just our culture and certainly church and, these different things are such a setup for all this. I think of, the Jerry Maguire movie, You Complete Me. I mean, that's just one example. There's thousands of those. In church, sermons get preached on, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. And they're taking it out of context and certainly.
Oh, pastors don't do that.
No. So yeah, good gosh. But okay, well, Jesus said that, but Jesus also said, when they ask him, "What's the greatest commandment?" Well, he goes pretty simple: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one, it's like the first one: love others as you love yourself. Well, wait a minute, Jesus, like love myself, but deny myself. And so we miss all of what Jesus is talking about, because so much of what Jesus talked about every time he spoke was about boundaries.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Jesus said no left and right. It's like, hey, Jesus, come over here. And he's like, no, I'm going over here. I mean, if you look at it from the context or just from the paradigm of boundaries, it is amazing how, Jesus was obviously the most well-boundaried human being that ever walked this planet. And, nothing deviated him from his purpose, his mission. They tried left and right, and, man, he knew who he was.
Boy, did he.
He knew what he was about, and he did what he had to do, and that's a well-boundaried person.
We solve that by not talking about it, though. I love asking this question to Christians, as a Christian, asking them, hey, how do you explain all the people that Jesus did not physically heal? like
yeah.
that he walked right past.
Yeah.
How do you explain that? And you just see the wires cross and then zzz, zzz, you know, and then there's this really explicit example of Jesus healing someone, and that person says, I want to go with you. And Jesus says, no,
Yeah.
I'm leaving. You stay here, which is wow.
It's
Wow.
just,
I haven't heard a sermon on it, but it's in the Bible.
Oh no, you won't hear that. You'll
Yeah.
hear sermons on serving and
Giving,
sacrificing,
serving, and giving. Yes,
all that. Yeah.
So a little bit of what we're talking about here, I love the contrast that's being described, Eva, that you're bringing up, is the difference between like that self-soothing, which that codependence can be very soothing in a lot of ways, and self-care.
Yes.
That's a completely different thing. And I think if we're honest, which it's our podcast, so we can be, self-care, that's a realm that we're not taught about very often.
Right. I agree.
The enmeshment within the family and the roles that we're playing and all those things that we talk about, that doesn't lend us towards, hey, I'm dysregulated, I need to participate in some self-care here. We go back to coping mechanisms that are self-soothing, which is, as great as that phrase sounds, it can be very damaging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. But because you're trying to get something from another person that may not have it to give, right?
There's so much truth in that. Yeah. So could you, stepping out of the spouse or the partner language here, you could actually apply that to your caretakers, the people that raised you. You're asking them to give something to you that they didn't have to give. Yeah, that's a real place of freedom. I've noticed in everyone's story who's done this deep work, that realization, painful in the beginning, but becomes a real place of freedom. I know it has been for me.
Yeah. And in our own journey, mine and Ron's, he didn't really have a lot of empathy for me and what had happened to us. He had a lot of shame, and guilt was mixed in there. But what I would experience from him early on was that he would go more victim than really know how to empathize. I really think empathy is more of a last stage in the recovery process. He didn't have the tools to really connect with what had happened. I mean, he felt shame and guilt, and he was under great conviction because of it and wanted freedom. I mean, I totally get that. But he really didn't have it to give to help me. As much as I wanted it from him, trust me, I did. But he would end up just doing more damage to me.
Yeah, it's, growing up addiction, the breeding ground is growing up in a very dysfunctional home. And certainly there's degrees of dysfunction. Every home, there's dysfunction. All you got to do is just, go read the Old Testament of the family stories, right? I mean, it's all there. It was dysfunction junction.
Man, you read Genesis and you're like, I cannot believe God included this.
I know.
This is wild.
Yeah. So it's there from the beginning. And then, when you grow up, and just in my family, I always say we put the fun in dysfunction. And it was just, I had no structure, no boundaries, no curfew, no parental figures. And so and that's not that story, but it's just typical where it's some dysfunctional family system and you don't learn the skills on like how to even deal with your own emotions. That you even have emotions. I mean, you can have happy ones, right?
Those are acceptable.
Yeah, you can talk about those.
Right.
But boy, nothing negative, any kind of negative life event, we avoid that. You go drink or medicate, however you medicate, you figure that out. And so, and then when discovery happens, when all this stuff, comes out, there's a sense of freedom on the betrayer side, the addict side, of like, man, all this stuff that I was carrying around is now out, and you feel there's a sense of freedom. That doesn't mean it's over. It doesn't mean it's gone. But because you've been carrying this stuff for so long, and now the secret is revealed, it's like you can even breathe. And then you're putting the monkey on the other person's back, right? Because they did not know this. But I had no skills to be able to relate, to be intimate, not sex, to connect, to attach, to be able to have empathy. That just was not present. And, it's like all of these things, I mean, we should be learning those things, that, developmentally as a child, in the maturing process, not just chronologically aging, but emotionally developing. That should be like healthy, growing up, if you had in the ideal world that none of us live in, but you would have had parents helping you along with those types of things, but we get nothing, and some less than others. And so then, like, I've got an emotionally dysregulated, completely destroyed woman, and I'm like a deer in the headlights. And it's almost like you're just in survival mode because I don't have any idea what to do with my own emotions. I'm just discovering those. And then I've got this emotionally dysregulated creature that's, what do you do? And so I think survival is like, I love her. I don't want to be divorced. That's not what any of the acting out was about. But how do I do this? And just totally clueless. And so we danced that dance. I wanted to, but I had no idea of how to be empathetic. And that's one reason it's like I did not experience what Eva experienced. Her experience of trauma and discovery trauma was different than mine. I had my own trauma, childhood stuff and all of that, but I did not go through what she went through. And that's why we talk about, and Eva talks about it and encourages it, is for the spouse, the partner, to get engaged with a community, a group of people that are further along, that have experienced that.
Yes, the partner's going to heal in community with other partners who've been through it. Now, what Roan could do and learned how to do over time with a lot of help and guidance was really to, validate what had happened, acknowledge what had happened, and validate my pain, and then reassure me, right? And many times I knew what I needed to hear, right? He didn't really always know what I needed to hear, but so I would coach, and we tell that to couples all the time. It's okay to ask for what you need, to coach, to say, hey, this is what I need to hear. When you're ready to say it, and you can say it with empathy, let me know, right? Because the delivery matters, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to loop back a little bit because I think this is so critical with where we are as a culture today. I think victimhood is the water that we're all swimming in. And so going victim has almost become slang, right? So I think it would be helpful just to hear like some victim language, and then some empathy language. I know that may sound very basic, but I'm the basic guy in the room. So it would be helpful for me to hear like, oh, when I say things like that, or my posture is like this, that's a victim posture. This is what empathy looks like and sounds like.
Oh, yeah. We always say, anytime you hear the words always, like you always do this, that's always a signal. If I'm saying that, I've dropped into victim mode. If it never, you never do this, you've never done that, never and always, I've dropped into victim mode.
So those absolutes.
Yeah, and the thing of it is, because those aren't true, right? Nobody always does anything, and nobody never does something. And so I've got to be able to understand, become aware of like, what's my victim language? Because when you start hearing yourself say this, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm being a victim. And haven't met a man yet that wants to be a victim. However, when we work with what's called the drama triangle, the Cartman drama triangle, there's three positions: victim, perpetrator, and enabler, parent. And it's like we get couples on these triangles and help them work out an argument. And we always ask them, where do you want to start out? And like, no guy ever wants to go stand on victim. But every guy that I work with, every man, that's where they're starting.
They got a condo there.
And I'm just like, dude, come on over here. You're in this corner.
So that's why you say that pouting is a man's superpower.
Oh, dude, we'll suck, we'll pout, we'll go in the corner and suck our thumb, and like, man, that's gonna change something, right? It's that withdrawal, right? I'm gonna shut down.
I see.
Because I don't know what to do.
It sets the partner up to want to rescue.
Oh, yeah.
To get
it meets a need.
It meets a need in a very unhealthy way.
Man, look at that.
Mm-hmm. Because that was our dance. Eva would.
I was the rescuer, enabler.
She was the parent, enabler parent, and telling me what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And as long as I did, it worked great because I'm over there in that victim corner looking for a mama.
Every victim needs a rescuer.
Yeah. I'm looking for a rescuer. Okay, great. And I go along to get along until I don't do something. And then she bounces down to perpetrator and gets angry. And then it's like, oh, gosh, she always does this. She's always trying to control me. She never does this. I just victim.
Yeah.
And then bounce over there after you get a belly full of that. I would volcano, just like, I can't take this. And then, boom, go to the corner, suck my thumb, withdraw, shut down.
So a victim will get defensive. A lot of times they'll say things like, well, you know what? I'm going to group and I'm doing all this for our marriage, instead of saying a well-boundaried man is going to say.
I love the Eva man voice.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I wish people could see it. I'm doing all this.
Because she sees it every day. Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting. That was just awesome.
Yeah.
No. So, but a well-boundaried man is going to say something like this: hey, I'm doing my work for me. I want to be sober. I want to live a life that I don't have these crazy thoughts in my head. And that I'm doing it for me. And instead of the message of, I'm really doing this for our marriage, or I'm doing this because you're making me do this, that's a victim. That's more of a childlike position.
Yeah, the quick story here, I sat in session, Eva, you probably don't even remember this, but you were so poised and sitting in the therapist chair, and all professional, and I'm on the couch that, like, you just wish the couch would swallow you some of these appointments. But you held your hand up to me, which, like, for me is usually a trigger. But when you did, I was like, whoa, this is different. You held your hand up to me and you go, that's not your responsibility. I was like,
did I?
Wait a minute. But I'm sharing that now on this podcast because that phrase unlocked a lot of stuff for me that was driving me into that victim mode, because
gotcha.
I would try to fix things and then I couldn't fix them. And then that's what I would be pouting about, because in my family of origin, I was the fixer, depended on to fix especially emotional issues, and went about doing that. Was trying to take that into my marriage, and that phrase, that's not your responsibility, was a big gift to me, because it kept me from pouting all the time. Which, who wants to be married to a pouter, by the way? It's got to be a terrible thing. That's why my wife's not sitting in this podcast studio right now, because she knows what it's like to be married to a pouter. So that victim, pouting, absolutes, defensive posture.
Blaming.
Yeah. Ugh. So let's switch over quickly to the other side of it, being empathetic. It's got to sound almost like the exact opposite, right?
It does. It sounds like, hey, I just want you to know that I realize how much I've hurt you. I get it. I know what has happened, and I just want you to know I'm with you. I'm fighting for my sobriety, and I'm doing this for me, but it's really because you are worth it. You're worth it. And I want to be a man. I want to be the best partner for you, the best husband for you, and the best father for my children. Right. And I really understand and validate your pain instead of trying to go, when are you going to heal? When is this ever
when are you going to get over
When
this?
are you going to get over this?
Yeah. The presence of that, like, I have a desired outcome. You know, that empathy, the way you describe it, it sounds like there's a releasing of that. Like I'm in this right now. This is the work that I'm doing, and I'm not doing it just so that we don't get divorced or just so that my kids don't hate me, or there's like always this imaginary, if I can get there, this will all be over and better. And then we're trying to drag the dead body of our betrayed partner all the way across that finish line, and it doesn't matter that they're bleeding out. To be able to, in that empathetic posture, to say, I don't know where this is headed, and that's terrifying. But I do know how to own, at least today, I know how to own where I am right now.
That's right.
You know, and that's where I'm sorry, it turns into, man, I'm sorry. Those are same words, different posture.
Right. And I really love the phrase, I was so wrong, to gaslight you. If I have a new memory of that season of our lives, even today, if I were to have a new memory and I were to bring it to Roan, how would you respond today, Roan?
Yeah, if that, because it has happened.
I wish I had one right now for an example.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. Let's keep this hypothetical.
No, I mean, if I had a new today walking down the trail, you and I are out for a walk, and I said, "Hey, I just recently had this memory come up."
Yeah.
How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would probably say something like, "Gosh, I hate that. I'm so sorry that happened. I really get how much that hurt you. I understand how painful that was, and that's not the man I am today. And I'm so thankful for the journey we've been on, and I'm just glad that we're together, and I'm here with you, and I'm not going anywhere."
Yeah.
I have to say, and this may seem trite, but that almost sounds like a foreign language relationally.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Like I kind of went to that. I felt like I was watching a movie.
Oh, wow. Because he says that all the time. That's really his response many, many times if something comes up.
That's crazy. It just sounds wild. I'm just taking the posture of our listeners, because I had a memory come up, and the first thing I'm thinking is, oh my gosh.
Panic mode.
It's inside out, and anger is about to take the joystick. It's like everything gets just lit up, but for you to be able to say, all right, I'm receiving that, and I can respond in a particular way, even your language and your tone said, I care. I care about this. I care about this. And the other part of it is, which I love what you guys are pointing out, is I can still, decades later, I can still own that.
Right. And I can still have the freedom to need to talk about it if I need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can now have a conversation that's very healing versus conflict that was destructive.
Yeah. God, that's so big. I mean, resentment and reminders that lead to resentment, or resentment that leads to reminders. I mean, I feel like we just ping pong, so many of us ping pong between those two things relationally. And that thing that you guys just did behind these microphones is like the water on that fire, to be able to say, hey, let me try to be empathetic here. Most people, especially men, would think, well, let me just try to be pathetic here. That's the victim mode.
I will be pathetic.
I will be pathetic.
So that you'll rescue me.
So you'll rescue me. I'm just glad you're walking with poor little, thanks for noticing me. That kind of thing. But just practicing that empathetic posture, man, what a big gift that could be to each other. And to think about the things that could emerge in your relationship that have been hidden because it just didn't feel safe to bring that up to the front. What a big gift that could be.
Well, it's just, even the definition of empathy, empath, is just feeling with. And, it was that, again, for me to be able to do that, that's a lot of work, a lot of time and practice in doing it. But it is just the simple idea of like, wow, what if I were in her shoes, right? What if I had walked where she walked? And certainly in our work and connection and all the stuff that we've done and just years, I get the pain that I caused because of what I did. And I can own that, and I can stay in radical ownership, right? Rather than go into that victim mode, like, oh my gosh, we've been at this 32 years, and you are still bringing this crap up.
When are you going to let this go?
What is wrong with you? Golly. I mean, that's like, but even when I say that now, I mean, that just even feels foreign to me.
That's
too,
awesome.
I think we can both, when we have conversations, we can both feel such sadness for those people,
Oh, yeah.
for the people that we were, right?
Oh, yeah.
It makes me want to cry now, even thinking about who we were. Just sadness.
It
right?
is. Oh, yeah. And I think, the development of empathy for me in my journey was sitting in groups and listening to other men share their stories and like, oh gosh, because you just hear a lot of pain and you see it and then I think the next level for me, even before we started our practice, we would meet with couples as kind of lay leaders in our church and celebrate recovery. And I would get to hear the stories from the other side of the fence, right? Not just Eva, but I began to hear, other wives, spouses talk about the pain and the hurt. And now, of course, I sit with it about every day. And boy, for me, that has been the journey of like really developing true empathy in this process.
We say it often on this podcast, and I think we're probably going to for the life of it. What's broken in relationship has to be healed in relationship.
That's right.
And
it's the only way it works.
Yeah. And I think with what you guys are describing, to say we can't put all of that relational burden on the other in the relationship. That's just never going to work. Although it feels like a really healthy containment strategy. Like we're just going to keep this between us, but putting all of that burden on just one other person.
I know.
Not a good strategy.
No.
And I see, with the groups that I attend and the groups that you guys talk about, there's always that moment of fight or flight. When you pull into the parking lot, you're like, am I really about to go public with this? And share this burden with other people. But the freedom that occurs when you walk into a building and you see other people in process, and then when you start to hear their story, you're like, wow, there is a 10 years from now that is hopeful, and I can borrow a little bit of that and take it into the relationship. That's pretty awesome. So the last stage of this that we haven't talked about yet is getting to that partner stage, right? Where it's like, hey, we are truly partnering here. And then we had a brief example of that exchange of empathy, but it's even broader than that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe we could take a second as we're wrapping up our time together today just to describe what does partnership actually look like? Because I remember that the minister said it during the ceremony, but not a whole lot of explaining.
When you lit the unity candle.
That's right. Like the ring has no beginning and no end.
Extinguish yourselves and become one.
Yes,
right?
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, now we're braiding ropes together, so maybe that's a little better. But
well, I love and it comes from Dan Allender's book, The Wounded Heart. He has a chapter in there on betrayal trauma, on betrayal. I can't remember the name of the chapter. But in it, he describes what nearness looks like in a relationship and what oneness looks like. And many of us who have had some trauma in our lives, we do nearness. We get nearness. It's more of an enmeshed kind of existence with another person.
Okay.
But oneness is different. Oneness is that we're doing life together. We're not enmeshed. Roan does a lot of things on his own, and I do a lot of things on my own. We have some different interests, but we have the same shared purpose with one another. we feel like we're more interdependent today than we've ever been, right? Even though we work together, but we're very interdependent in that we even drive in separate cars to the same office.
I get that. I totally get that.
And I love it so much. I don't feel enmeshed. I feel safer than I've ever felt. I have felt like we have oneness with one another that is healthy. And it is, I love doing life with this man, but I don't have to have him to have a great life. Yeah. I choose him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I want you, but I don't need you, because neediness is dangerous.
Yeah.
It's funny, Eva mentioned that we drive in separate cars. I mean, there was a time in our lives when you would not have been able to do that.
No.
Yeah. Mm-mm. Oh, yeah. And that was like enmeshment is what because we started dating when we were 15, children. And so we just we had such a hard time separating. Where do I end and you begin? I mean, it was beyond codependency. It was just like enmeshment. And so, the journey is like really beginning to separate that out and
figure it out.
Yeah, figure out who we are. And then,
and just living lives where we have no secrets between us. Mm-hmm. There are no secrets whatsoever on a daily basis. Lots of communication.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oneness it doesn't sound easy.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound easy. It sounds like
but it's not hard either.
Yeah.
But it's not that hard.
Once you figure it out. Okay, we can do this. It is possible. And I think, boy, I just have to say behind Mike, that registered with me the I want you, but I don't need you.
Yeah.
And having this hyper-religious background and having participated in the church, because, we do talk about God on this podcast, but if we could start presenting God that way, I think things would turn inside of a lot of churches, because we feel compelled to sell to the people in the pews or in the chairs. God needs you. He needs you to go across the world. He needs you to put that $50 in the plate, and it's like this sense of desperation and codependency, but you just can't find that biblically. And it makes the story so much more beautiful to understand, wait a minute, God doesn't need me. He wants me.
Yeah.
We understand that at a human level, that one feels better than the other, but it's developing that courage in our relationship with God and our relationship with our partners to be able to say, wow, I am getting that need met, one of those basic needs of the human heart. I am chosen. Mm. And in those moments where I'm not chosen by the spouse, I'm never not chosen by God. That chosenness is always there. So to be able to operate from a place of strength at all times, that feels pretty cool. I think I may try that.
Yeah.
I think I may try it.
It's much better. Yeah.
Well, I'll say, just to wrap out the episode, just like a congratulations to the two of you for the work that you've done and the work that you're helping other couples do. And in case we haven't done it in a while, we do need to put one of those shameless plugs in for the book, because the book details this process out just so beautifully, and both of your voices are represented in that one text. It's a quick, 2 clicks on Amazon. Boom, you got this book, and they can dig into the story a little more. But your vulnerability, your openness with your journey, it's just helping more and more people, and I couldn't be more excited about that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, this is all good stuff. It's fun to do all the life with people you love.
There you
Amen.
go. To learn more about what you've heard today and to engage with the Sex, God, and Chaos team, visit sexgodchaos.com.